I welcome you all to our Scoia'tael workshop. Somebody called it before, best faction
Best
in the
faction.
game. Twink, twink, twink.
No exaggeration. No lie.
Yeah. And we present you today the Scoia'tael faction. I will tell now how we will proceed to the workshop. We will have a few points. After now the introduction, we will talk about the general archetype of the Scoia'tael faction, the general function of the faction, the synergies. So you get a good cover of how Scoia'tael works as a faction, how it was in the past, how it is now, the pro and cons, and we go a little bit also into the card types. What are the pro and cons when you're building a deck with the consideration of the different card types, bronze slots, gold slots, silver slots, and then we will move on directly from there to the deck structure, from the meta decks, talk about the meta decks directly, not only in general, but go deeper in the current meta decks, like, let's first say, Brewer, Scoia'tael. We will also shortly go over the other leaders who are not so favorable, like Francesco and Philandel. And after that, we will continue to the matchups and go each matchup you will most likely see and face through the matchups from the different factions. And after that, when we come to an end, you have then also the also the possibility to ask questions. And yeah, I would say let's start. Haiku?
Yeah, so let's start with the just talking about the faction in general. Do we want to start with sort of a historical perspective, or maybe just jumping right into?
I would say from the past. Let's begin there first.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Well, so
Your mic is, I think, not working. Can't hear you now. Aiko? Oh, and he has a disconnect. The workshop's starting good. I will take over. Classic, yeah. Only happens in Scoia'tael workshop. In the past, for the say, I don't know how many people of you already there in close beta. Back then, dwarves seen much play. It was a whole different game back then, uh, and that the archetype itself, the general Scoia'tael archetype, evolved pretty much and from past then till now, and also you have currently a very minor, I would say, minor piece of what Scoia'tael was before, and who already there at midwinter update and open beta between that timeline. Who knows where Scoia'tael can shine? We have had often that Scoia'tael surprisingly comes after a balance change with a few decks and very strong decks like Scoia'tael and handbuff decks who then flooding the board. Last time we saw it was Midwinter update with the Brewer deck, Dwarfs deck, for example, that you have Scoia'tael dominating the meta, dominating the player counts. Welcome back, Haiku. I took over for now.
Okay,
And
that's fine. Yeah, keep going.
currently you have the Scoia'tael meta in Scoia'tael, which also sees very much play. Um, by the time 1.5 months earlier, where also the faction challenge was, it was dominating as well. And that's also a deck which we later talk about, the Scoia'tael, Scoia'tael deck. And I think it's important to know that Scoia'tael has many different options and was in the past with a few different archetypes and deck types on the top in the top tier list. We're not sometimes the best deck around, and it's when you have time, go take a look on these decks. You can still find it on some websites. You can ask players who were around back then and ask them how it was, and it gives a good insight. We unfortunately we don't have the time to go through every deck from Scoia'tael who were strong in the past. Maybe for another workshop in the future, going through the history of the factions. I think that would be also very interesting, just to know what is a faction capable of, how was it back then, understanding the card mechanics, the mechanics of the card game even better. And it gives you also a good advantage to when you build decks in the future and changes happening, good insight and help how to build a deck in the future when balance is happening, and you can maybe catch the race who builds the next meta deck.
Yeah. Great. Well, so I don't think you got to this. I didn't miss that much. Before we get into this,
now you can continue with pro and cons.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Do we want to kind of talk about faction identity real quick, and then?
Yeah, I think that's with pro and cons. I meant that faction identity.
Oh, you went through that already? Gotcha.
No.
Oh. Okay, we can talk about that. Well, so Scoia'tael right now, best faction, obviously. But no, so I think what makes Scoia'tael unique right now, Scoia'tael is in a decent place actually. For people who've played for some time, we've been talking about this, but NG Spies is a list that comes to mind because it's a list that requires a lot of thought in terms of the order you play in, as opposed to something like NG Handbuff right now, right? Which is a pretty easy deck to pilot, or something like Vets where you just point slam, right? So with Spies, you saw a lot of combo play, a lot of just having to think about which order you play things in, which is why both Nordi and I really enjoyed the whole concept of just decks like Spies where you have to think about what you're playing. Scoia'tael in some sense lends itself to that as a faction. You have a lot of opportunity for synergistic play, for combo plays. You also have some decks that ironically are more point slammy, like River Nova Swap, which we'll talk about obviously. But at its core, Scoia'tael lends itself to a lot of interesting combo play, a lot of synergy, which is kind of, I think, what makes it unique. And then as far as, do we want to talk about deck slots as well, I guess, right now?
Sure.
Well, so as far as general deck slots goes, so one of the things that Scoia'tael has going for it is that it has a lot of just really good synergistic bronzes. So the bronze and silver core for Scoia'tael are just honestly really strong right now. You see for a lot of other factions that their bronzes, require a lot of setup to get synergy going, to get its full value. But with Scoia'tael, you actually just have a lot of good standalone bronzes that have high value in and of themselves, but they also synergize really well and really easily with other cards in the faction, which makes it pretty easy to get synergy from them. So a good example of this synergy, which we'll get to when we talk about the hand buff list, but we can just mention it right now, is the hand buff mechanic, or just the boost mechanic, right? So you have a lot of cards that just have decent value by themselves. So one of those cards is, for instance, the Neophytes, right? So Neophytes are just a 10 power card, and it boosts 2 units in your hand, right? Which is a net of 12 power, which is fine for just a bronze that you're dropping by itself, right? But then that also benefits cards like Farseer, right? Which boost, which go up by 2 every time that your hand or a unit is boosted. It goes with things like Swordmaster, right, which is kind of the core and the win condition of hand buff. It goes with things like Hattori, which, so basically you just have a lot of good synergy in the faction as far as bronze goes. That also is interesting because that is currently why Scoia'tael is the best faction for Shoop, right? Because for a Highlander deck, the classic weakness of a Highlander deck in pretty much any card game is the lack of consistency, right? Because you don't have multiple copies of the same card helping you with synergy. With Scoia'tael, the reason that it's so popular and so strong to play Shoop in Scoia'tael is because pretty much a lot of the bronzes synergize really well, or just kind of do the same thing, right? Like a lot of Scoia'tael bronzes are just very similar, just decent cards to play, even by themselves. So you're not trying to specifically draw into cards to get specific synergy, because a lot of the cards just have inherent synergy, and so it doesn't punish you really for building a Highlander deck because your bronze slots are so strong.
Haiku, very quickly, sorry
Yeah, what's
to
up?
interrupt. For the sake of the audio, could you explain
Go for
to
it.
people who might not know what a Highlander deck actually is?
Sure. And if you guys have questions, just please jump in. Were you going to say something, Nordi?
No, just explain.
Oh, okay, yeah. Highlander deck, so basically you include 1 copy of each card instead of... So for instance, if you look at the Nova swap list, right, you have 2 copies of each bronze, right? Or the Nova list swap, you have 3 copies of each bronze usually, right? Because that provides you more consistency. So for instance, if you're trying to thin your deck, it provides you more consistency to run those multiple recons, those multiple Elven Mercs, which allows you to always get what you need, right? If you see a deck like Alchemy, right, they rely very heavily on the synergies between Aels and what's his face? I'm blanking.
Novice,
The tutor, yeah, Vicovaro Novice.
No.
To pull those cards, right? So, for instance, so with Highlander, and I guess we're getting a little bit too much into the Shoop deck right now, but basically the Highlander deck is you just have a single copy of each card. Nordi, do you want to go over the Silver Strength?
Silver Strength. It's your core of the deck. It's what makes the bronze shine, and where the gold cards can adapt. You have very much your high power cards as silvers. For example, classic is Scoia'tael, who pulls a bronze dwarf, a silver dwarf from your deck and strengthens it by 3. It's in itself gives you much power. Combined, you can also combine it with your bronze card and your leader card. Usually you have a silver card who attaches the function of the brewer, let's say the leader card brewer, with a bronze card. Gives you very much value. For example, what you see now, brewer into Barclay into Cleaver. It's very effective, high points, combo, tempo. Same goes with Hattori. Hattori, who was around at the Midwinter update, it was just devastating. Yeah? Especially then in combination with another tempo play like Barclay, pulling it with Paulie, the silver card. So you see there a pattern. You have silver cards who having synergy with other silver cards, with the faction cards, with getting the value out of the bronzes, and that's how many of the Scoia'tael silvers work. Then you have such useful cards like Ida Amin, who gives you weather clear and is a very effective card in many situations. Then you have very nice spell cards like Nature's Gift, for example, who can give you a bronze special from your deck, which can function also with synergies with the other special cards, kind of synergy with the leader card, Efne. And there you also have synergies upwards, backwards, on both sides, in how it can be played, how it can be executed. Using the leader card to play a silver card, for example, again, and get another card. That creates much a high point play, and you can also use tempo. We'll later talk about when we come to the decks why they're so successful, and the thing is because these plays with the silver cards, like for example the Brewer into Barclay Els into the Cleaver, it's a high point value play, tempo play. You can play early on without much setup. So it's just devastating when you can do that in round one so early. Another thing is I think I want to cover the cards that are not that doesn't shine that much right now, but I think people should keep an eye on when they want to master Scoia'tael are the ambush cards. They don't get the love I think they deserve, but ambush cards can trick your opponent. Ambush cards can be very successful just because of the mind game. And if we get more synergies with ambush cards in the future, since we will see many changes to the game, it's definitely worth to keep an eye on them. It's definitely worth to try them even out right now, see how they function, see how far you can go with them, because it's good to know. And you even can, when the opponent lets get tricked, get a score or two. Yeah, like what Alice says, it's one of the most fun things in ST, and fun is also an important factor. And I think the reason why many people love Scoia'tael because it gives you so much satisfaction when you play it. So much funny things can happen with Scoia'tael. That's a
Yeah,
good thing.
I want to jump in there and talk about the ambush cards briefly, actually. So the ambush cards are not fully fleshed out right now because you don't have, a whole lot of them as far as ones that are viable. But ambush cards, like you said, are just really fun and interesting, which is originally one of the things that attracted me to the faction, actually, was the ambush mechanic. I think ambush doesn't really get enough thought. Sometimes, you'll just see some decks playing the ambush package, which is Teruviel, Melina usually, and then what's his face, the 11, the Sappers, which is just, it usually just turns, it ends up being another way to just slam points on the board, right? Like it ends up being a way to put points on the board. But I think one of the really interesting aspects with ambush is the ability to play some mind games with your opponent, right? So
Correct.
there's so many little things you can do with ambush, and things that your opponent would just kind of assume you're playing a certain way, but ambush gives you that ability to sort of play with your opponent's mind or trick them, right? So for instance, and this doesn't always work, right? But for instance, if you play an ambush card on an empty board, right, your opponent's usually going to pass. If you play Teruvial on the empty board, right, and your opponent passes thinking that he's just going to get that card up, you just end up winning the round real easily, right? Or if your opponent thinks that you played Teruvial because you played an ambush card on your long row between 4 different units, but you actually played Melina, which is best case scenario, I think 3 more points than Teruvial is, right? That can actually win you the round right there, because they could play trying to catch up with what they think is Teruvial, and then if the card triggers and pops for 3 more points, all of a sudden their calculation was wrong, right? Which means that you just played a card which, especially if they're an experienced player, they might think that they know exactly how much that play is worth. But Ambush just gives you this huge ability to play these rounds without actually having your opponent know exactly what you're playing. So, yeah, I think Ambush... Yeah, go for it.
That's also now currently the downside, I would say, or it's not that huge right now because there aren't enough ambush cards, and that's why I also said to look forward to try them out and look forward for the future when we see more synergies with ambush cards, more ambush cards, because right now there aren't that much viable ambush cards you can play, and so the pool from ambush cards is very limited, so the opponent has a good clue what that ambush card could be.
Right.
It's maybe a 50-50 chance, or a 30-30 chance, percent chance, and that's not that huge. Let's say you have the opponent expects. Let's say you have 5 different ambush cards. So the card he plays around is only 1 card out of 5, and that's a huge difference than playing around 1 card out of 3 or even 2, especially considering you most likely will only see two cards in an ambush deck, and that is Melina and Teruvial, because Modern isn't sees that much of a play, and maybe you run the Sapper, so you have 3 cards and 1 out of 3. And it can have a surprise, but unfortunately, there aren't that much ambush cards. So, but then like Haiku said, ambush cards will be really interesting and definitely something we can look forward to. Another thing I want to say to the silver cards is, with, like I said before, the synergies. On top of that, you have very high fitting potential in Scoia'tael with the silver cards. That on top of the power potential is why the silver cards in Scoia'tael are the core and where the deck revolves around. For example, the Brewer and the the Nature's Gift I mentioned before, both fin through your deck, what is very good. So you have high power play and you fin on top of that. Scoia'tael has also some hyperfin decks, and I think it's the faction who can fin through his deck most easily from all the faction around. I think no faction can top that, what Scoia'tael can pull off in finning. And that's also a thing to consider when you build your deck, when you think about how you want to get your deck plays out. And that's a huge point for Scoia'tael and the silver slot. I think another point with what I want to mention, it maybe will be changed in the future. Currently, right now, we still have the runestones as it is, and I think the Scoia'tael runestone is the best, maybe one of the best, maybe the best. Who knows? But he's still, I think, why not the best, the second best runestone. Nilfgaard runestone is also very good, but the Scoia'tael runestone has much options, and it also has some cards you can pull the runestone and get even more power out of the runestone. That's why you see the Scoia'tael runestone that often be used in decks, because you not only you can pull it, for example, with some card, you can use it again with Efne, for example. And I think it's also, when some people don't like create, use it as long as you can, because, like I said before, the Scoia'tael silver slots are the core, and when you can get another card from that awesome silver pool, why not? Yeah.
Yeah, we have a comment in the voice chat companion. So Vedrai said that he thinks that the ST runestone can miss big, which it can. I think the key with that is knowing, well, this is an issue with create, which is another topic, right? Like currently the create cards have such a big pool, and we were talking about this last night actually. I think, honestly, I like create as a mechanic. I think it should stay in the game. I think, and this is an unpopular opinion, I think that some level of RNG like that is really cool and makes it more interesting for people to watch, right? For streamers to like.
Don't let drift up to create. I would say.
Yeah.
Let me say something to this.
Yeah, go for it.
Estuary runestone can miss big. Yes, of course. Yeah. Every runestone can miss big. Yeah. It's just what I said was it can give you good value, and compared to other runestone what we have, it has very good chance to give you very good things. And overall, I think the percentage, when you look at how good can you get value out of the runestone, I think compared to other runestones, it's very good. If you now like runestone, that's all why I also said if you like runestone or not. Yeah, it's still in the game. It has its positive and negative effects. I think, yeah, create. I don't want to drift so much to create, because create is a great topic, and also I think a complicated one. Should we mention it? But I think let's use create, and then as it is, we will cover it. The cards who have create. I think no fundamental discussion about create, because I think
That's fair.
we have enough of this discussion in the community, and
that's a different discussion.
let's
With runestone specifically, yeah, like all the runestones can break. You just have to know what you're trying to find, right? So you have to, like, if you're playing runestone and you're looking for Hattori, right, you want to make sure that you have something in your graveyard to play with it. So yeah, that's fine. Do we want to talk about gold slots?
Yeah, the gold slots.
Sweet.
I would say from all the factions, we had the silver. I think you can say silver are one of the best silver pools from all the factions. On the gold slot, it's not looking that good for Scoia'tael, to be fair. It has some good cards. It had some very good cards in the future. I can't see in the future, but in the past.
What do you know that I don't?
Yeah, you want to know?
I need this insider knowledge.
Let's see. Let us surprise.
Leaks.
I'm not Bursa. In the past, we had Ifling, for example, which was very good, but the fact was it was the only really good Scoia'tael card. Now people will now say, oh, but there are other cards. There is Shiro. There is Year of Meditation. Okay, let's say Midwinter Update, Year of Meditation saw much play, but the fact that was, yeah, it was more like the meta thing for the short time. But I would talk now, this was also a very short time, I would say 1 month. Before that, you had one time really good, most like maybe 2 cards, one really good card, and then one who was assisting. You have Shiro, who is constantly good. You have Year of Meditation, who is finally back and solid. I would say Isengrim Outlawed is still solid.
Wait, Yurvith meditation or just Yurvith?
Yorif, just Yorif, not Yorif
Yeah, okay. I was
meditation.
gonna say
Just Yorif is
meditation,
solid
not
back again.
yeah, yeah.
Yorif meditation was nerfed. I think Eggless is such a thing. I would consider it solid.
Yeah.
Also, when some people like it more, some people like it less. It's just I think it's a meta dependent card. Also,
Yeah.
how much will Scalabby sees play? How much other deck types will she play? Where Eggless can pull cards from? Right now, we have some a little bit weird situations where you also see Sasuke play because of Scoia'tael. Beside that, the other Scoia'tael cards are not worth mentioning, I think. It's just movement is not there right now. You
You've
have
got
also
Isengrim, Valtiarna, which
I said Isengrim.
oh, you did say that? Sorry, I
Yeah,
missed
yeah,
that. Yeah, yeah.
Isengrim.
Okay.
Isengrim ambush card, Isengrim Outlaw.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
The same. Isengrim Outlaw is viable.
Yeah.
I think he has much potential to be good. He's a much synergistic card. It depends on the bronze and silver special slot, and also he's a create card. Depending on how create will change, it will see where it goes from. So
Yeah.
he has potential to getting better. I think in the future, even he's solid now. Isengrim Fire Tiana. I hope I speak that correctly. My English is not the best.
Oh man.
It's with the like the same with the ambush cards I talked about in silver. It needs much more the ambush synergy and to be seen more play. I think we then he can shine, and we already saw him sometimes in some decks,
Yeah.
ambush decks, playing out. I think if 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 we see more ambush cards, he will be nice. I liked him. I want to see him find some good spot. More in Forest Child, it's not in a good spot. Let's be honest. Same with
Yeah.
Milva. Brewer Hoax, since there is no movement. Again, same. Saucer Assassinus and Xavier Moran. I think both cards are good for beginners. Both cards are very solid for beginners in the early ranks. Xavier Moran could find some value. Would the dwarf archetype be good? But it isn't, unfortunately. And that's, I think, I covered all now. All goals. That's it for the goals.
Yeah. I think one of the issues with those gold slots, like we were saying, is there's some really good staple ones, but there's not a whole lot of options right now. Like, especially if you take, I guess, depending on the deck you play, but especially if you take a look at the challenger deck lists, like their gold slots are pretty homogenous. Like, there's not a whole lot of variation there, and that's not something you like to see. Like, you'd rather see a bunch of, you'd rather see some creativity in terms of what they bring. But right now, like, it's pretty easy to pinpoint the cards, which you just did, I guess, of which golds are the best golds to play.
And
So I think
when
in
we are
that
doing
case,
gold slots, that was not a Scoia'tael gold slot.
right? Yeah,
And when you look at the challenger, I posted before a link. I can post it again. So I think not everyone was there before when I posted.
yeah,
Posted in the voice chat companion. There you have the list from the challenger. You will cover later the decks. And when you look at more the decks, you will see that every Scoia'tael deck has some neutral cards, at least two. And that's the reason because Scoia'tael doesn't have that good gold setup.
yeah,
It has 1-2 cards who synergize highly with the deck type, and then it draws more 2 cards from the neutral pool. Also, there are very good neutrals right now. For example, Tris Marigold. It's a very good card. Which synergizes with the archetype. And I would say we go a little bit deeper now into the archetypes.
Yeah.
And you can then also we can also then connect the dots between the card types and the archetypes and
Yeah.
bring the whole thing together.
Yeah, let's talk about archetypes. We can cover the leaders when we talk about archetypes. And yeah, Vedra, you're right. Tristelli, not Marigold. But yeah, the current
Tris
Tris.
Silicon.
Oops.
Yeah. Marigold is
Yeah,
not.
the card names.
Yeah, no.
It's good that you know what I mean. Tris
Yeah,
Silicon
yeah.
is so
Yeah. The best Tris.
best. Tris.
Yeah.
Don't
Okay.
start a Tris Yen war here, please.
Dude, Shawnee. What? All right. Never mind. Real talk now. But Shawnee, actually. All right, let's talk about archetypes. Let's start with Nova Swap and Novala Swap. How about that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the deck list that we are going to use for this one, which doesn't really matter because they're all the same pretty much. But we'll go off the Freddy Babes list, just very standard list with no surprises. So this deck is really good and is at the top of the meta right now. It has the highest win rate of any deck at all of the win rates, all of the MMR below, I believe, 4K, so below rank 20. And then above rank 20, you still see Brewer in the top 2, right around Great Swords as well. So Brewer, the Nova Swap list is very popular. It's probably the most played deck right now on the ladder. It has a lot of core synergies here that we can look at. So some of the hallmarks of this deck, it thins really, really well because of so it thins well actually, so let's start with the Barclay Cleaver combo first. So Barclay Cleaver gives it insane tempo at the beginning of the round, right? It's a 26-point combo at the beginning that thins your deck by 2, which is just absolutely insane. Having that kind of thinning plus tempo, like that's honestly, they're probably going to take a look at it at some point, but right now, the way that it is, it's just really, really good. This is all
good.
What's up?
Ridiculously
Oh,
good.
ridiculously good. Yeah, like, the ability to just do that. Furthermore, it synergizes with the spy, right? Because you're able to abuse the spy that way, because if you have Barclay in hand, you can pull spy from Brewer, right? Which enables you to play guaranteed spy, right? Which makes it hard for your opponent. If they don't have spy, it allows you to bleed during round 2 with spy, guaranteed, right? If you want to do that. So just having that access to whatever silver you want, usually just the Barclay Cleaver combo is just really, really strong. And the thinning is one aspect that people don't often think about, but the ability to thin your deck by 2 like that is pretty underrated, just really good. As far as the bronze core goes, the main synergy of the deck relies around swarming its elves and buffing them up with the what's it called? The vanguards, right? So your strat is to basically just use a bunch of elf bodies on the board, right? Which eventually pulls out Aileron, which gives you more tempo. And then you swap out the vanguards with your officers to have really huge tempo plays, right? And then from there on, when you control the tempo, you're way ahead of your opponent. You're basically in charge of the round, and then you just win, right? Go for it.
You finish in the end with Nova, the big play.
Right. And that's why the Nova version is stronger, right? Because you actually have pretty strong short round finishers, whereas the Novalist version relies more on that mid or long length round. And if you get into that short round, I guess, what's your best finisher? That's probably Triss, right? Or Glass, which is still weaker than a lot of. So, for instance, Alchemy is just going to be.
Glass depends on what she can draw on.
Right.
I think Triss is also very solid.
Yeah.
Many people underestimated Triss telekinesis, and but it's very useful, very effective. A reason why we see her in much decks, also in a challenger. Uh, Besides the neutral card, like I said before, you have 2 gold cards from the faction, and you have 2 cards, neutral cards, and it's here in the Nova decks, the Nova and the Twister Telekinesis. You also see her in many other decks, so expect her to see in some other decks from factions, especially Nilfgaard. I was the one who posted it on GwenTB, so
Oh,
blame
okay.
me if you see some Nilfgaard
Oh
deck.
my gosh.
I was the one who posted it on the first. And yeah, I think this deck shows also pretty good the strength of Scoia'tael right now. Shows what we covered before with the card types. The gold slot, like I mentioned, you have some good cards who synergizes with what the tactics. Your Orbit is a good removal. It's really solid. It can shine in the meta where it can remove something for 8 points, gives you good points. I think it's also synergizes here with Ellerin as well. The silver slots, the Barclay Els combo with Cleaver, with the Brewer, the Hattori, the Ellerin for more thinning. You have their high point value tempo plays. You have the thinning. You have some with Idamine. You have some flexible card, and of course you have the spy. The bronzer types, because it works so well with Nova. Uh, it has some good cards that either bring points or have even the chance to get more points to synergy, or have some cancer effects like War Cancer, who give you card advantage for doing nothing. Yeah. Or it can also brick you. Don't forget, it can brick you. War Dancer can brick you. But since you also can swap with Warhead Officer, you can unbrick yourself. Just don't, just don't get in a position where you have War Dancer in round 3 that for a 3-point play.
Yeah.
That's to mention.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the drawbacks to War Dancer obviously is the fact that it can brick you, which it does sometimes, right? Like sometimes drawing into that War Dancer will literally just lose you the game. Not often, but I think the thing with this deck is because it thins so well, right? Because you have so much thinning in it,
True.
the risk of it bricking your hand is significantly lower because you kind of can play the odds and know what you're getting into at the end of the game there. So War Dancer is problematic right now because, you know, it's not, there's no way to interact with it in some sense. The way you have to interact with it is expecting it and playing around it, but there's no way to for instance, like lock it, right? Or to steal it with muzzle or something like that, like you can with some of the other carryover cards in the game, right? Or to transform it or whatever. It just there, right? It's always there. And I think the natural drawback toward Answer is that it's supposed to be able to brick your hand at the end of the game. The issue right now is it usually doesn't because this list is so good at thinning. Um, you just, which War Dancer thins as well, right? So you just expect to usually have what you need at the end of the game. You usually end up drawing into Nova when you need it because the list is really good. So, yeah.
Exactly. And that's also, I think, why this Nova list is better than the normal list, Scoia'tael list.
Yeah.
Because I made the experience. You can go easily to a deck, get to your Nova.
Right.
Don't brick on the War Dancer, and on the other hand, the normal list has a much higher chance to brick. That's what I personally experienced, and I think that's why also many people choose the Nova list over the normal list.
Mm.
And it gives you also, like you said before, the punch for round 3 with the Nova, and you have exactly what currently the whole game is shifting to. Be in to get a little bit understanding of that. I explain how it was back then like close battle, you had the whole game was more about playing a long game, playing the whole long game, and you had all often long round three. Monster were very strong, so you had that weather game over a long round, and short rounds were more likely a rarity than compared to today. Today, short rounds are more favorable by many decks. They search for a short round, especially since we have Nova. We have strong finishers currently in a few archetypes, like say for example the Nilfgaard Alchemy deck has very strong finisher too. So you have currently the shifting to playing high tempo in round one, kicking the enemy out, so you gain control, and bleeding if needed in round two, and then go into a short round three where
Yeah.
you have the upper hand with high plays,
Yeah.
high synergistic plays, where the enemy cannot answer in a short round, and that's why many deck archetypes fail to compete right now because of exactly what this deck does. Is monsters, for example, is complete at the bottom because of that. The high tempo in round one, the carryover comes here on top with this deck. You have carry over with the War Dancer to get card advantage. And when you win round one, you can get even more card advantage with Yevon if maybe such things can happen. Such things can give you a very good position, and on top of that, you have a good round three finisher. And when you have card advantage and the round three finisher, it's goodbye for the enemy, for your opponent. I think that's important to know about this deck and why it's so strong.
Yeah. Yeah, and go for it.
Expect that this current state of the game with the tempo and high finisher will continue at least until we see the major change with Homecoming.
Yeah.
At least that's my prediction.
I don't think they'll change it that significantly in the coming patch. Not enough to completely change up how the game is played, at least. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty good for the swap list. I think the reason also that it's so popular is because it's pretty easy to play. It's probably the easiest Scoia'tael list to play that we're going to talk about. And it's also really good, so it just requires less effort, right? Like, you have some really good decks that require a lot more thought to play. This deck is it's good, and you can play it optimally without having to learn it too hard, right? Like, it's just your plan is play elves, buff elves, win the game.
Just to mention, as you don't have, when you play this deck, you don't have that much removal. You have Yorvev.
Yes.
You have Idamin. You have the Cleaver. Cleaver is most likely not that much removal because it gets played very early.
Right.
So it don't have the targets to be considered as, I think, effective removal against engines. A possibility is Elven Scout and the Doppler, which can give you cards. That's the create cards.
Into Panther.
Panther, for example, yeah.
Yeah. Or Swordmaster, I guess, but Swordmaster doesn't really count if you can't buff the Swordmaster in hand.
It can removal with 5 points. It cannot really effectively remove engines, so I wouldn't consider it in that option.
Not really.
Removal.
Real quick, Matthew is wondering if we're going to not mention how to play the list versus specific matchups. So what we're doing, Matthew, we're going to talk about the 4 different main archetypes you'll see on the ladder, and then we're going to talk about the matchups right after we get to that. So we're going to talk about matchups just later on.
And then we go into the specifics. So, like I mentioned earlier, we take part, and so we can focus more on each part and just hold over it in a go and make it general. So we can give you a little bit more specific information about each part.
Yeah.
I think next one where we think should cover is Smell, handbuff list.
Let's talk about Shoop, because it's
I would like to cover Shoop last.
You want
Or
to cover
do
shoot
you want to
blast?
go now? I mean, I think
No, that doesn't
now
matter.
since we are at Freddy Babes,
Yeah, let's go
deck from
to hand
Challenger
buff because it's yeah.
to Smell,
Yeah.
because I want to cover this because it's the
Go for it.
only Scoia'tael deck from the Challenger who was not a Scoia'tael list.
Yeah.
And the Scoia'tael list, like we saw now from Freddy, the only thing changed from all the decks, Scoia'tael, Scoia'tael decks who were brought to Challenger, was the two different code cards at most. So two
Yeah.
different gold cards who changed at most from the decks. The silver and the bronze core was the same, and that says much about the bronze and silver core, like we said before in the card types explanation, how strong the bronze and silver setup from Scoia'tael is right now. It's just a little bit of gold that where you tweak and where you change a little bit, because silver and bronze are such as so strong, especially in this the deck we covered now, the Scoia'tael deck. It's top tier,
Yeah.
where even most of the challenger contestants bring this nearly the same deck, nearly 95% the same deck. I think that says much. And on the other hand, you have then Smell, who thinks, I go a little bit crazy and tries hand buff. And it's a pretty good contrast, I think, to what we have on the other hand, the players who bring mostly the same deck. And you have a hand buff deck, and it's, I would say, how would you consider it, Haiku? Special?
I would say
Unique?
it's I was thinking as far as tiers, it's probably like a tier 2 deck.
Yeah,
It's a
tier
good it's a
two.
good deck that has a lot of good matchups, but it also has a lot of weaker matchups. So it's a deck that if you play Hensel and you can force them into that long round, or you can kill all their machines and force a dead Hensel, like great, like you win the game. But also like sometimes it's not as strong, right? Because it doesn't have as good matchups as
It
Brew.
varies
Yeah.
from how I would consider it. It was say special. It can be very good, but it can be also very bad.
Yeah.
And I think we saw it in the game. What happened there, where that in the game he played, Smell had the disadvantage with this deck, and on top of that, bad RNG.
Yeah.
That comes when you play a deck who is already needs to be have a favorable matchup, then and you are don't get this matchup, and then on top of that getting RNG, it doesn't look that good. But I think it's still worth to mention because it's very interesting. It's kind of the opposite from the deck we saw before. The Scoia'tael deck, it has very much removal potential, especially from normal hand buff decks. Smell goes a step further, and plays so much removal that it fascinated me that he comes up with such a deck for the tournament, while all other players go with the standard list. And let's cover it for step by step. You have the gold setup with Yorvith, one removal. You have Muzzle, who can uh, get you an engine with 8 points. Good gold card. We saw Muzzle very often in the past before Midwinter update, and I think it still sees play in some decks from time to time. Especially a good tech card when you for tournaments. You have the Rivalry Cree, where you also can get the Yorif for your instant removal. You have Isengrin Outlaw, who can potentially give you more the removal with great, or can give you a special card where he had also like say the artifact compression, who can is attack against engines or against big units. Let's call it a removal.
Yeah.
Also when it's replace a unit.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then you have in the silver slots lot again removal. You have Ida Mean and you have Vademaka. So you see where it goes. He goes completely against engines with removal. The bronze setup is the Alvin Swordmaster who gets buffed by the Wild Dragon and the Hocker supporter, where you have big value removal again. And this 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 whole removal setup needs to find its targets. When it doesn't find its targets, you lose much value out of these removal cards.
Yeah.
Especially the Elven Sword Master, you want to play them at the right time. You want to buff them and then play it at the right time. And then we come to the problem what Smell had. The other part of this deck is Finning. You have the Mahakam Volunteers, you have in the silver slot the Marching Order, the Asus Double Cross, in the gold slot the Isengrim Outlaw, cards who pull things from your deck. Also here the one Dwarven Agitator who pulls the Mahakam Volunteers. So you need to have these cards to fin through your deck. I forgot the Royal Decree, which is also finning. So the one part of this deck is removal, the other part of this deck is finning. So he needs a finning to get the cards he needs, the buffing cards, to get the Elven Sword Master buffed in the hand. So that's the plan, for example. Yeah? You want to fin, you want to have the right cards in your hand, because you want the Elven Sword Master in your hand to get buffed by the buffing cards. Problem with Smell had, he had bad RNG, he wasn't able to buff his Sword Master, wasn't able to find the good targets at the right time with the removal, and I think that made the matchup, the game for him really, really bad.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, when I was looking at the list, I think he did get hit by RNG, but also the list is a lot more RNG dependent for its thinning. Like, I get what he's trying to do with the thinning, but I feel like, for instance, if you have a volunteers in hand, right, or if you have, like, for instance, like if you have marching orders later on after the volunteers, not marching orders, if you have agitator later on after the volunteers, like there's a lot of conditional plays here where if you don't meet the exact conditions or if you have a bad hand, you just are probably going to lose, right, if you're playing a really good player. Additionally, this confused me as well. So I don't know if muzzle is the optimal play here, because while it's good to get you an engine, you already have all the tools to deal with your opponent's engine. So muzzle felt kind of redundant to me when I saw it in the list. It also weakens Royal Decree, right? Because all of a sudden Decree only has 2 targets, and you're getting okay value out of muzzle, but you already have the tools to deal with all of your opponent's engines. So the inclusion of muzzle doesn't seem like, apart from maybe the Great Swords matchup where it gains value, it doesn't seem
tactic, especially against Great Sword.
Yeah,
I think he also expected greedy consume.
maybe.
Maybe that's why he put so much control removal into it. I think it's a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Also, when he tried to fin with the other half of his deck to fin through his deck and commit half of his deck only through finning, and you see also some synergies when you say you don't have Markham Volunteers in hand, you don't have an Agitator in hand. You can use marching orders to get Agitator into Markham Volunteers for massive point swing, massive finning. If that can work out, really good. But also has much potential to break. And like you said, if you break with this deck, it's over, because then your complete game plan is gone. And you still can hope that you can remove some engines, but currently that's also why it failed, because one, it bricked, and then it had the problem that just the points for the removal he had wasn't enough to bring points on the board to win him this game.
Yeah.
And that's also a reason why many decks currently, beside top decks, don't see much play. That's why I also choose this deck as example to show there are some very good lists. Yeah? You will find for every faction, but it's the current game is in a state where you will find many top not top tier 2 decks or even tier 3 decks with potential to be better or see good value in certain matchups. The problem is that the current state of the game favors decks who can make high plays, smash high point value plays on the board, have much tempo, and be consistent on the top. On top of that, while
Hmm.
when you have then a deck like this who has some, I think he made it. This why I also like a point why I chose this deck. He made some really nice combinations, and it
Oh
shows
yeah.
good how you can use some of the different cards in Scoia'tael and different combinations of cards to build a deck which has a specific goal, a specific tactic. Uh, but the problem is, it's just the combo itself. It needs so much setup. It has so many different. It has so many things who need to work out to be good in the end, to
Right.
have the point value,
Right.
that it just lacks in comparison to decks who just get the point value easily without much setup. Uh, and that is what we had before with the Scoia'tael list. You
Hmm.
have that high point value plays who don't need much setup.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. Um, I think that covers that. I mean, yeah. It honestly, it's a really cool deck, and whenever people play it, I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised because it's something different than Brewer, and it's got really awesome combos. Like, if you, like you said, marching orders, or even outlaw into marching orders into agitator into 4 volunteers, like that thins your deck for like 5 guards or something, and gives you a pretty big play. But like, it just when you compare it to Brewer right now, it's just very underwhelming. And
True.
RNG can screw you over. So
I think last thing I want to mention is
yeah.
also a point why to choose this. It's Efne. Efne in
Mm,
this matchup, you can also in this deck type, you can use it for marching order. You can use it for Asus double cross. You can use it for artifact compression,
yeah.
especially artifact compression or Mandrake. Sees much play in Efne decks
Yeah.
when you have decks around like Consume, where you can use Mandrake 2 times, uh, who were around the challenger before the last one, where
Hmm.
JJ just completely shut down Consume,
Yeah.
and we saw and concede in so early,
Yeah. Yeah. That was funny.
just because Efne can use one silver card again, and when this silver card is especially a tech card against some matchup, you can easily shut down uh, an opponent and make his whole strategy worth nothing.
Yeah.
That's also, I think, one of the strongest points for Efne. And it's a little bit sad that Efne doesn't see that much play like Brewer. I think Brewer is a little bit higher in the play rates.
Yeah. Way higher. Yeah. I mean,
Do you want to cover um, spell attacks with
Spelltown.
Efne when we are
Yeah.
at
Let's
Efne?
talk about Spelltown. And actually, before we talk about that, well, 2 things. So Matthew has a question. Isn't the list more of a tournament list? It's going to be less efficient on the ladder. So yes and no. The list obviously has tech choices that he's picking for the tournament, but the idea of the hand buff list, that is something that sees play on the ladder. I don't know if it sees as much. I know it sees some play on the pro ladder. Probably not that much right now. I think there was a short phase where there was a bunch of hand buff running around with sword masters. But it is viable. Just some of the tech choices change. Like muzzle probably has to change at that point.
For a ranked ladder, I would make him more consistent.
Yeah, it needs to be way more
Take
consistent.
removal, a little bit of removal out.
Yeah.
Give more thinning into it.
You need more proactive plays as well.
Yeah.
I think it probably ends up working better with the Elven Scout or not Elven Scout. Merc Recon combo over trying to get one massive thinning with your agitators and your volunteers. But yeah, and then the other thing, real quick before we get into Scoia'tael. So, as far as Scoia'tael leaders go, really we're only going to be talking about Bruver and Aithne because those are the only ones that are going to see play. Unfortunately, the other ones so we can mention those real briefly now as to why we're not talking about those. They don't have viable deck lists right now. Francesca is a cool character, but a terrible card, right? Like, I think she needs a huge redesign as far as leaders go. She really only caters to one specific archetype, which is swap. She doesn't thin your deck like Bruver. She just not a good leader at this point. You're way better off just going with, like, at the point where you see Bruver being run for the swap list over Francesca, who's supposed to cater to swap, something is wrong, right? So I know there were some older lists that were run in the past with Francesca, but right now there's no reason to not run just Bruver. And then Philavandrel. So we talked about this last night, actually.
I think it's the same like Francesca.
Yeah.
Bruver is the better Francesca.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it gives you also the card you want, but Finn's on top of that and plays it in the same turn.
Right.
While Francesca swaps a card off your other hand for the card you want.
Right.
And okay, she has a little bit higher pool where she can draw from. And buffs it with 3. The thing is, where she synergizes is with swap, where it gets much point. But like you said, when Bruver sees very much more play in Scoia'tael than Francesca, something is wrong.
Yeah.
And the same is with Philavandrel. You have, I think, Aithne is the better Philavandrel. Because Philavandrel, it's a great mechanic. On one hand, so you don't know for certainly that you get the card you want. But you get a special card. Maybe you get another Nature's Gift on top of your already having a Nature's Gift, or another artifact compression, for example, and have a second option. And Aithne does give you the card you already have in your deck and played. Maybe, for example, artifact compression, the tech card, and plays it again. And I think that is very, very strong and very powerful.
Yeah.
It was even more powerful before with Egles pulling a card from the enemy and playing that again.
Right.
I don't know how many Commander's Horn I played in one game for that reason
gosh.
back then in Midwinter update. So you see, I think you have two leaders who can do what other leaders can, but better.
Yeah. I think that's all to say about that.
Yeah.
But I wish they were better. I wish I think Philavandrel is really cool. He's not
both
good.
really cool.
Yeah, both are really
and Francesca.
Yeah.
Hope we see them reworked and having a good spot then. Especially Francesca. She's wafer.
All right, let's talk about Scoia'tael.
Yeah, you want to cover it?
Sure. Yeah, well, so basically with both Aithne lists, the kind of keys to these decks are that they're more control lists, right? So they focus around controlling your decks, or controlling the opponent's board, removing their engines, etc., dealing with threats when you need to, and then allowing you to play your own strategy out. So the basic Scoia'tael list focuses around playing lots of special cards, right? Which buffs the Dolblathana sentries. And so by the time that you play them, right, they are pretty chunky plays, right? Really good, high value bronze plays. We're talking about this deck mostly because it's a really unique archetype, I think, and it's just a good example of Ithne control. It's just not It's not viable right now for a couple of different reasons. One, it's lacking a lot of proactive plays. So in a meta right now, where you have decks like Brewer, which can just push out point or turn after turn, you just have massive points, right? You don't have good removal for a lot of your special. You don't have good targets for a lot of your special cards. They're not getting full value, which means you're losing the tempo of the round, and you're allowing your opponent to dictate when you can play cards and when you cannot play cards, right? So the issue I think with this deck is that its game plan is really just reactive, and you don't have enough proactive plays to make it work. I think this could change if they. I think there's ways to give this deck more proactive cards. We were trying to brainstorm last night a little bit, and I think we talked about the fact that perhaps in the future, if there's a way to create a hybrid Scoia'tael deck where you have some proactive plays, but that still enables you to buff your sentries, I think we could see a return of this. I think Ithne no longer seeing play also hurts the Scoia'tael deck as well. So I think with Scoia'tael.
Haiku,
Yeah, what's up?
Lotari asking if we have a deck list for Scoia'tael.
Deck list for Scoia'tael? I don't have one on hand. We can look one up real quick though.
I mean, it's not very.
It's probably going to be an older list, right? Because I don't think it's
older list because on currently, yeah.
But sure, let's find a. There's got to be one on GwentDB, right?
Sure, Scoia'tael they're here. Yeah, it's I think.
Oh, I found Pumpkin's list from May 2017.
Yeah, I see.
Oh gosh.
Let's post that.
It's the one with Ithne and Tremors.
I think that's a good point where you can hook on Ithne and the changes to Ithne and crippling Scoia'tael.
Yeah. I think in the last few months I've maybe seen it played one time personally. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the deck. And basically, like we talked about with the two leaders, this also, talking about Scoia'tael, kind of helps us to distinguish. Oh, thanks for the list, Matthew. It helps us to distinguish the two leaders that are really viable right now. You have Brewer, right? If you're playing against Brewer or with Brewer, you can expect high tempo, proactive plays. They're really trying to push you to get their win condition out at the end of the game in a short round 3, which is kind of the meta right now, which is either their Nova or their Shoop, right? Whereas for Ithne decks, if you're playing an Ithne deck, you know that they're probably trying to play a bit more control, right? They're trying to deny you your game plan a little bit more, which is the case with Scoia'tael. And as well with hand buff. And also all the other weird variants, right? So you have Ithne Hazards, you have all these different kinds of decks that come with Ithne. But yeah, as far as the specific card choices go, I don't really want to go deep into this just because
I think it's not that worth mentioning.
I don't think
going that deep because it's not seeing that much play right now.
Yeah. Your basic game plan is just play spells or play special cards and then play your sentries.
It can be maybe happening. Let's see with great, getting some great cards will give you maybe a special a pool from those specials or like spell cards. I think what it really needs is also gold card that synergizes with it more. Having there more cards who goes having synergy with the deck archetype. Since Ithne was, let's say, carrying the whole archetype.
Oh yeah.
And since she's changed, the archetype doesn't get the value anymore. Right. And also the point is here at Scoia'tael, you solely rely on the sentry for the power. or mostly, let's say mostly, rely on the power you bring on the board, proactive with sentries. And what we saw in the last few months especially since the Midwinter update, is a change in the power state of what is the average power value worth of a bronze. And that is what you also currently see in the current meta. You have high point bronze plays, and which outvalues easily a sentry when you consider the whole bronze value of a current meta deck, and then you have the bronze value, the average value of the Scoia'tael deck, because sentry doesn't carry anymore and doesn't have that much impact,
Right.
and you mostly have to play it even before round 3 and lose points because of that, or even have that enough points to dominate a round 3 with the point slam of a sentry.
Yeah. And because you have decks that can just poop out points way faster, like constantly, like NG hand buff, like it just no proactive plays. It's just not good enough to see play right now. Yeah, I don't know. Is that all? Do you have anything else to say about Scoia'tael?
I think that covers it. Just
All
look
right.
forward to see it maybe in the future.
Yes.
When it only needs a card besides Sentry who gives it power value.
Yeah.
One or two good gold cards who synergizes with the faction or with the archetype, and it's good to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, rip for Gwen for hand buff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gwen, that was.
Yeah.
Like I said before, it's worth going through the past and look at the decks, because maybe some people don't know what Gwen is. It was a mechanic who can shield the unit, and it was very
It's
good in hand
supposedly
buff.
coming back. Supposedly.
Oh,
Is
that
it?
would be nice. I mean, it should be coming back
Okay.
because it's one of the important signs
In The Witcher, yeah.
in the Witcher universe.
Yeah.
And I think one of the favorite signs who played the Witcher games.
Yes. It
Yeah,
protects you from so much.
yeah, especially on higher difficulties.
You don't need to block
Okay.
if you can just dodge everything. What?
Right.
Alright.
You don't need a block if you have an invincible shield.
Oh man.
That will definitely save you from death.
Yeah.
Okay, then I would
shoot.
say that's it for the meta decks. If you have some question to
Wait, we gotta talk about Shoop still after.
some other decks. Wait. I said meta decks. I said we covered the
Wait,
meta
what?
decks.
Oh my
Okay,
god.
Scoia'tael is no meta deck, but we covered the main decks, main focus decks, meta decks, and the main decks right now. But when you have questions to specific decks after it, that's what I want to say. You can still ask us questions to specific decks. And now we come to the meme section.
Oh my gosh. I'm
The
being
meme
trolled right
section.
now.
Yeah, here.
No.
Memes can't be stopped.
Now comes the memes.
Oh, good
yeah,
lord.
Shoop is a meme. I don't call it a meta deck. It would insult people
Oh my
when you call it a
gosh.
meta deck. Or
Alright,
main
so
deck.
Shoop is in my opinion the best Scoia'tael deck right now.
Yeah.
I
I think it deserves its own section.
Yeah.
It's just like it can be really good, but it also is just. I don't think it has found its state. I think we will see how it goes in the future. It's kind of interesting thing. That's why I want to put it in its own section. Maybe not that meme-ish like other decks,
Sure.
but I think it's its own section, and the reason I think you want to talk about the Shoop deck is also because it shows very good how the strong sides of Scoia'tael, right?
It does, yeah. So that's partially it. And also, it's kind of the deck that I have found myself running more on ranked, which mostly because it's more interesting to me than just playing Nova or something like that. Like the variation with Shoop is just kind of fun and interesting, kind of RNG. But yeah, it also really helps to highlight some of what makes Scoia'tael its faction. So let's just talk about it real briefly. Basically, the Shoop deck is similar to the Brewer Swap deck in terms of the initial combo, right? So you have the Brewer Barclay Cleaver combo. You have Spy, which the way that Spy works, it guarantees you pull Shoop every time. So you have that combo, which is really solid. And then, like we said, because there's so many synergistic bronzes, you can play just a bunch of different bronzes and have them all just play and synergize well, and you're still getting value out of them. The other advantage with the Shoop deck is it's very hard for your opponent to disrupt your strategy because you don't really have a strategy as far as your bronze goes. So if you don't have a strategy for your bronzes, you're like and one example of this, which we'll talk about later, is the Henselt matchup. So for instance, Henselt versus Swap, right? Henselt just kills all of the Swap. Let's see. So Vedrai said there are two different Shoop versions, the Cleaver version and the Dwarf package version. Yeah, that's true. And I'll mention that in a second, I guess. The Cleaver version relies on playing just Barclay and Cleaver. The other version relies on playing Barclay into a different bronze dwarf. And this works in combination with Hattori, which can pull back your Barclay into another dwarf for a massive finisher, right? The thing with Shoop, which is why it's really good, is similar to Brewer Nova. Your game plan is to play a longer early round, right? You're trying to beat them on tempo, and you have enough synergy that's possible. I like running the ambush package actually because it gives you a lot of high tempo plays with if you run Isengrim Outlaw, Isengrim Valtiarna. It lets you have a really good chance of winning that first round and then lets you dictate the final round. And that's where you try to play Shoop. I think, yeah, in some sense, Shoop is a meme, but it's also a legitimate win condition in the sense that having Shoop can just straight up, for instance, so if you for some reason get into a long round against Brewer Nova, where you're probably guaranteed to lose, right? Because their bronze core and their swap mechanic is always just going to beat you, right? Instead of playing Shoop as your finisher, you play him for hazards, right? So you either play him trying to get hazards on the board, or you play him at the end trying to high roll into like a pit trap or a Dragon's Dream before you play Shiru, right? Or a YOLO charm, which is sometimes really good, right? You can charm a Ronvid or something, which is really powerful. So I think with Shoop, one of the strong aspects is it has a lot of, it's kind of like an all-in-one deck. You have a lot of tools that you can play. Most of the Shoop decks run a lot of removal. So you have up to 4 or 5, even 6 removal, right? Because you have Ida. You have the Panther, which a lot of Shoop decks play. You have Cleaver originally, which granted that doesn't really count as removal because you usually play them at the beginning. But if they play an engine, you obviously can use it on the engine. You have Elven Swordmaster, which is very easy to buff because the Shoop decks run a lot of the hand buff cards, cards like Neophyte and Support. And then you also have Yorvith, which a lot of them play. So you have up to 5 or 6 removal. So this actually is sneakily kind of a control deck as well, right? With all the removal that it packs. And then usually the Shoop decks will run Shuru as well. So you have the Scorch there. I don't think we need to say a whole lot more than that other than distinguishing the Shoop deck from the Brewer Nova deck, particularly because it has... we'll talk about this more when we get into matchups, but it has some different matchups than Brewer Nova. It has some less favorable matchups, and it also has some more favorable matchups. Okay, so Vedrai posted a list that he runs. So it looks like he's running the version that runs... Okay, so you're not running the Cleaver combo, right? Yeah, so he's running the version that is playing Barclay into a dwarf and then trying to res Barclay into Hattori for a late game finisher with one of your big dwarfs. So also a viable option. I personally like the elf only version a little bit more because it lets you run the ambush package with Faltiarna. And obviously I'm a sucker for the ambush mechanic, but I think that list might actually be marginally stronger. Oh, you are running ambushes in it as well. Oh, I didn't even see that. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
in
you can do
shoot
it there
decks
as
you
well.
will find also Isengrim, the Isengrim ambush card.
Yeah.
Congrats to you for actually pronouncing Isengrim's last name, because Jesus. It's
Oh man,
I can't even
Complimented
begin.
you.
Some of the elf names is just like how.
they're hard to pronounce, definitely. Okay, so you are running the ambush package. I didn't realize that. You don't have Melina in there, so you have Roach. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, that's that. There's plenty of shoop lists. They all are very similar, though, other than that one change. So you can find those on GwentDB. But yeah, it's a meme, but it's also a viable meme. Like, shoop has been the list that I've been playing at top 100 since January. It's fun to play. Like, it's just a lot of fun to play.
And I think
You know?
it trains people when you play it. It will train you how to use points very efficiently. When do you
Yes.
play what? I think even better than Arena, because Arena is sometimes gives you easy choices.
Yeah.
And this deck will really help you getting better at the game. That's what I think. Because you have the choice making, you can maximize with the different bronze cards, each for each alone. How you can maximize it and how you can get synergies even if you have only one card of each bronze card. Also learn to appreciate the silver slots
Yes.
of your deck, because they will win you the game. And if you can maximize the points from the bronze card, you will even have chances with this in ranked ladder on a competitive level.
Yeah.
Because when you maximize the points, it's like Haiku said, it's a viable meme. It can win you games, even on the higher ranked ladder, and you can surprise people with it and send some good memes to the Dandelion show. And we all want to see some good memes on the Dandelion show, you know.
Well, and people are always expecting Brewer Nova, right? So if you come out with Brewer Shoot, it gives you a slight advantage because they're not necessarily expecting that to come out. So, no one is expecting you to be able to play 3 hazards on all the rows on a long round 3.
But at this moment, our opponent should know what you play.
Well, yeah. I think Shoop has been around for a long time, for enough time now that I think better players are able to expect when a deck is a Shoop deck as well.
Also mention Isengrim Fialtana.
I think.
Fialtana, yeah.
I don't know.
Fialtana, we're getting better. We're getting better. Here you have 3, like I said before, you have the 3. No, wait, not 3. It's just
you have
on this
3,
one list, or on the other one.
but this list doesn't have it. But usually he plays Melina as well if you play Eisenberg.
Normally, I don't know, maybe this list is some kind of, what I'm looking right now is confusing, because it doesn't, but normally you have Teruvial, you have the Sapper, and then the Melina, so you have the 3 ambush cards, and then with 3, it's also worth to consider in a Shoop deck Isengrim Fialtana.
Right.
For the extra surprise of ambush cards. And that's what I meant before. When we see more cards, and we can expect to be that Isengrim Fialtana will be good. And I think here in this Shoop list, that's why in my Shoop list I have this setup, because it has some quite surprisingly effects and can work out in very good favor for you. especially because they are also giving you not that better for on points value. Especially Malena can turn out pretty good. Maybe you can also find some synergies, getting some cards, some engine maybe when it runs good, down to under 5 points and steal some important cards. I saw that happening. Just make sure don't steal an iris. That's the worst thing that can happen. I saw that in the deadline.
Yeah, no, definitely. That was on Reddit, I think, a while back.
And it can also surprise, especially for the people who want to have a deck with which makes fun. This shoot deck for can with this ambush combination on top of it, it can win you games. Because Malena, when the enemy, even I saw that even on the high ranks, when the enemy the opponent is not concentrated and miscalculates, a Malena can fuck the opponent up, so he goes one card down.
Yep.
And also decision making, like you said before, you play to reveal he thinks it's the other card, or you have also the Zapper here.
Right.
In some situations, it can give you a nice position where you can, where the enemy has to make a choice. If he plays the card, goes to risk a pass, or plays a card, or what card he plays. Does he play now an important card, or does he play now an unimportant card? And maybe sometimes you are in a position, or the opponent is in a position where he has to think: does he want to commit a good point card or good point play right now, or does he want to pass? Because you have just one card for each bronze course. You don't have that much synergies, and that's why also Shup is, I think, that much better in some matchups, because the enemy has some strategy with tactic synergies he wants to get out, and he has some cards, even bronze cards, who are very important for these strategies. Your bronze cards are not that synergistic.
Right.
You can easily get rid of one of these cards. It's like a pawn in chess, yeah. And when you can trade a pawn against a tower, for example, it's a good thing.
Right.
You made a good deal.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
That's I think is important to know about Shup.
Yeah. So a couple more brief things about this deck. If you're running Isengrim and so Isengrim is actually a really good gold here in this deck, because it's a really proactive play to gain tempo in round one. Because you really are trying to win that round one, right? To go into that final round in a short round. And you don't care about expending your golds like that in that first round, because you're kind of relying on the strength of Shuru to just win you the game in the last round, which you have guaranteed, right? So as long as you can play your Isengrim early on, you can play your Yorvith if you're running it early on, right? And you kind of are relying on Shup to win you the game at the end of the round, which gives you a lot of flexibility. The only other thing that I can think of to say is I think Shup as a card itself is just a really fun card to play. But it also just has so many different tools, right? Like, you have a huge body with a reset, which can come in handy a lot of times. For instance, I still remember there was a game with the Letho Regis combo where I ended up resetting his Letho, right, with Shup, which ended up enabling the Shuru at the end of the game to scorch the units he was trying to block the scorch against. So there's just so many different tools, I guess, so many different options that you can play with Shup, which makes it a pretty unique and interesting card to play.
And also don't hesitate to use Shup earlier if you can see that you can make a huge play, or get a really good advantage, even in not likely in round one, mostly happening in round two.
Yeah.
When you can see you can push the enemy by playing a Shup, a really good Shup, and taking advantage of that, because many people will think that you will wait with Shub until round 3, preserve Shub, and then making the mistake to give an opening for a very good Shub play,
Yeah.
and that's where Shub also can shine through the much options you say, like you mentioned. Uh, you're very flexible, and where you can get value out of him.
Yeah.
Even 2-0 is possible with Shub. Like
Yeah.
a 2-0 playing weather in round 2, where you have the upper hand and know the enemy is weak against it. It can work out pretty good. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think that's enough of our good old
Agreed.
Shub. If you
Yeah.
want more, open some kegs. Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Let's move on to matchups. Let's talk about matchups.
Yeah. Let's move on.
So this is the last section that we're going to talk about. So we're just going to talk about the matchups, and then we will end if you guys have questions. All right. So mirror.
Miro is pretty solid forward.
Yeah. So okay, I can talk about the mirror. So for the mirror, mostly if we're looking at this, it's
Who has war cans and wins?
yeah. Who has coin? Who has war dancer? Yeah. When you play your spy also matters. A lot of people end up playing spy inappropriately, in my opinion. Like if you're on blue coin and you just pop the spy down against someone who also has that spy, that doesn't seem very good. Like because you're just gonna get bled. So other than spy usage though, and who has coin, the mirror with Brewer is pretty simplistic. Like because there's not a lot of interaction with the deck, and you're kind of just point slamming. As far as yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to spend too much time in the mirror. Board answer basically. I guess one thing we can say is in the mirror hand buff cards like your neophytes or even Yorvith, they kind of gain value if you are playing War Dancer, because if you have a buffed War Dancer, that gives you the edge on your opponent because it prevents them from dry passing if you just both have the same War Dancer, etc. So that's the only thing to be on the lookout for, right? If your opponent is using hand buff cards, it's worth thinking about the fact that they might be using it on War Dancer. It's probably suboptimal when you could be playing it on something else, like Swordmaster. But you know, and actually, now that I think about it, the Novelist never runs Sword Dance or Swordmaster anyway. So usually, yeah. I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts about the
Scoia'tael
mirror? Oh, Scoia'tael mirror. Yeah.
Not really. I mean, like I said, it's pretty simple, straightforward. It's not much that you have much interactions.
Yeah.
It's, I think, it's just like you can, depending on how round 1 goes, and how your hand state is, you can also, if you have War Dancer in round 2, pass instantly.
Yeah.
And have a long round. So don't push much further round 1. Depending on how round 1 goes, and then pass instantly and go for the long round when you have
Right.
really a really good hand.
Right.
You can also do that, especially when you see round 1, the enemy is lacking some of the cards he has. So you see that when he fails to bring some combo, for example, pricking on a Barclay Else in the hand, or cleaver. I mean, sometimes that's happening. You should definitely take advantage of that and push him out of the game.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay. I think we're gonna spend a lot more time talking about the other matchups. So, do you want to I think alchemy is your thing, right? Do you want to talk about alchemy?
Yeah, alchemy. Yeah.
Cool.
As alchemy player, I will say it's difficult for you. Yeah, it's very difficult. I think only real big chance you can have is by exploiting the tempo and the coin flip, because you still have a good finisher in round 3, but alchemy will have a really good finisher, and I think the best finisher overall with when everything goes right with playing the leader into Kahir. So playing Kahir, the Kahir into the leader, and most times also having Wilgeforce or Triss as a combo for a good round 3 finisher, and with the strength of 15 points Viper Witcher, it's pretty hard to really get ahead on round 3. That's why you need to see playing tempo in round 1 and try to get a good pass. That's what I would do as here playing, getting a good pass where the enemy that the opponent alchemy player has to invest much to stay to either stay in a round or get round, and the window for that is pretty short because alchemy has the Viper Witches, which bring much point. Can use Vesemir into high point play. Have Rainform, for example. He can play Triss early on. There's much good cards the alchemy player can use to easily get a point gap to 0 or even overcome it by a few points. So you have to see which cards he invests, the alchemy player invests early in the game, and it's also sometimes, I think, possible to really play the round out and see what the enemy alchemy player has in his hand and even go push it that far. Because when you have Wardens in your hand and you still play a long round 1, you can drop the Wardens in the next round and save a card. And that's it. That's the important advantage you have. So if the enemy has a really good hand, don't hesitate to play the round 1 as long as you need, and then drop a card, then drop the War Dancer, and then see that you have maybe a Nova as finisher and the other good card, and you can maybe overcome him in points. That's also a possibility. Depends every time on the situation and what cards alchemy player invests in round 1, what his handset is. I think overall it's a pretty hard matchup because it can catch up with your tempo. It has also its ways to bring good power slams with Rainfarn into a Joachim, into a Viper Witcher. It can also pull out a spy with Rainfarn if you want to use your spy earlier with after the tempo play. What I wouldn't recommend in a matchup with alchemy if you don't are comfortable to hold then the lead after that. So it's a pretty hard matchup. Yeah, try to get a sense. Maybe also play alchemy a few rounds to get a sense what can alchemy have in his hand in round 1. That's very important to have a feeling what could the alchemy player have, because there are better hands and worse hands with alchemy, and depending on that you can make more use out of your tempo, out of your out of your place in round one, and I think that's where the important decisions are made in round one
Mm-hmm.
here in this matchup. Because if you can get in round one a good state and then get important cards out of him, much more value you get out of him, the better.
Yeah. I don't play alchemy that much, but the only other thing that I can think of is that Molina is actually kind of a low-key really good card here if you can manage to pull out a Viper Witcher to steal a Viper Witcher before they can buff it. Having one less Viper Witcher in their graveyard is just sometimes really, really solid because it can brick their ointments. But yeah, I mean, as you said, hard matchup.
It's depending on the hand he had when he can play, for example. That's what I meant. Maybe I should have said a little bit in more detail. If he has only played one Viper Witch in round one, and round two, you said you round one you won it, just played one Viper Witcher,
Right.
and then because he only had bad luck with the draws, and then doesn't get a Viper Witcher with Joachim, for example, or doesn't have Tris Marigold into Reconnaissance.
Mm-hmm.
He only had one Viper Witcher. You win
Yeah.
round two, so he has only one Viper Witcher in the graveyard in round one. He does need to populate the graveyard with the Viper Witches.
Right.
I mean that's an option how we can also get a good state. I mean for an alchemy player will be a bad state. But the question is, will it be happening that way? I would say very likely not. It would be
Be very unlucky for them.
he has to be very
And
unlucky
alchemy is just
and
so consistent right now.
but has to have really bad state. I wouldn't rely on that. It can be happening, and that's why I also said one thing to look what cards can he have, how can his hand be, depending on what cards he plays, and then it's also important to know where to try to get out of round one or try to make a push. So in round one to see what cards you have when you increase the tempo. Then on, just after you played all your tempo, it's depending on your hand of state how far you go round one, and if you can get a little bit much out of him without investing too much, it's also good. I think it's a difficult matchup, but yeah, like I said, it's all about having your hand of state, knowing your deck, what power you have, and anticipating what could the alchemy player have.
Right.
You both feel very good. You both will likely get to the cards you want.
Right.
Don't forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Other NG archetypes that you can see, hand buff, reveal.
Hand buff is a thing.
Pretty straightforward though.
Straightforward. I would say don't give a hand buff the chance to I would say have a long round 3 is the worst thing you can have.
Yeah.
You have high tempo. You want to get use of out of the tempo. It needs a little bit of setup. Yeah, placing the units, one turn, buffing the unit, and giving it back to his hand. So it can be 2 turns or 3 turns that this needs to set up. These 2 or 3 turns are your chance to get tempo, and then it's a thing how your hand looks. But I think you either can go a little bit long round one, or when you have enough tempo and maybe the enemy also struggled to with his setup, or you have You have answer. It could also be depending on what you play. Let's say you can Shiro his first card,
Mm-hmm.
so he needs to play another card. Yeah, or he doesn't have one. That can also be possible, or needs to uh, get another card first as a so it can a little bit interfere, make the one longer a turn by this action, what is also good.
Yeah.
And that's there's where I would say you can also I think what would you say? I mean the first four, 5 turns you can go with good tempo. I think with Scoia'tael against
Yeah. Well, I was realizing it depends on play too because for Brewer the matchup is more straightforward in that sense. For Ithne though, I think Ithne actually, depending on which Ithne deck as well, but Scorch Ithne is good. And has a different game plan, obviously. If you
yeah.
can line up a bunch of big units, that's good. This deck also sometimes runs Lether Regis, right? I believe.
Yeah, I think I don't know.
So you have
I'm
to be
not
careful to
so
play
much
around that.
familiar with that, but
Okay, that's fair.
if he runs it, I don't think it will see play in round one.
No, definitely not in round one. But I'm just thinking in terms of the matchup. If you're playing Ithne Scorch, you have to be really aware of,
Yeah.
because he could brick your Scorches if he plays the Lether Regis combo before you're able to get value from the Scorches. Yeah, hand buff is my least favorite archetype, honestly, right now, because it just is kind of hi Hammers. It's just kind of
Hey.
point slammy and feels pretty mindless. So I think as far as the two different archetypes go, though, you have to play it differently if you're playing Ithne.
I think what you can do against handbuff is getting out in round one and having advantage out of it with the point lead when he takes back his unit. If he needs to depending on the coin flip, is that an option that he goes one more card down or has to pass because
Right.
going 2 cards down is not that much of an option.
Right.
So depending, it's I think much depending on the coin flip how you will play turn round one and how also your hand state is because you don't even want to let him any chance to win the round early on, even when you get card advantage if your hand is garbage.
Right.
Or don't have War Dancer, for example.
Yeah.
You don't want to risk it that much because
Yeah.
either way, the points he slams with the bronze card is high, so you don't want to have that in a round three where points really matter. So depending on that, if you have a good hand, you can try it and get cards out of him, or you just make round one and round two longer.
Well, and especially if you're playing Brewer, like as you said, the initial tempo plays, right, where he's setting up his combo for the hand buff are pretty low tempo. And it's really important that you win round one in that scenario if you're Brewer because they can basically pump out a whole bunch of points in round two. And it actually can be hard to catch up to them and stay even on cards or ahead on cards if they're getting just like 40, 50 points from 2-3 cards.
Yeah.
You can't catch up without playing way more cards than you need to. So winning that round one is pretty important and pretty easy to do. Not pretty easy, I guess, but it's definitely much easier than trying to catch up when he just puts down 2 25-point plays in round two.
And still, if he doesn't win, if you make round one long enough, you don't need necessarily to win. You just need to make it long enough.
Yeah.
And I think the worst thing you can do in this matchup is to play Spy in round one. Don't do that.
I agree.
Because even when you have a point lead and you do that and give him points, and then he can close the gap between your tempo, then you have and you don't win round 1, the thing is you then maybe play War Dancer, but he plays his spy and can push you as far as he wants and lose complete control over the match.
Yeah.
And that's why I would not recommend playing a spy in the first round. It's better to keep it.
Yeah, and we haven't really talked about spy usage, but that is spy usage is probably the most complicated mechanic in the Brewer combo deck, because a lot of times I'll see people, even if they're on blue coin, they'll literally just play spy on an empty board, and that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, you really, and especially in this matchup with hand buff, yeah, you want to save spy. A lot of times they'll save spy as well to get last say or to even play their Letho Regis combo. So you definitely need to know when to play spy. I think we were even talking about last night, but there's no rush to play your spy, right? Like, you still get the card. You need to be careful of how the spy is played.
But I think spy. I think we should make a workshop solely for
on spies.
How to play spy, how to get use of card event. I think that deserves a whole workshop.
Yeah, that's a different
topic. You can
topic.
talk so much about it. In different matchups, in different factions.
Agreed. Yeah.
Spies are so important. Also, even after the rework.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And then reveal, just kill their mangonels. That I don't know. You're the NG player,
but currently, I mean, you will see people play reveal, but I think reveal isn't just because it can get so much points on the board. It's not that important, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. We can maybe cover it later, the matchup.
Yeah.
If someone has a question to it, I think we can go.
If someone wants to know about it, that's fine.
It's just in one sentence. Reveal is easy. You just get tempo on the board. You can hold up with the tempo. When you say Scoia'tael, you have the tempo. You have the removal, a little bit removal, enough removal to get his mangonels, and when he plays, like for example, 3 mangonels and still has them, you have only 1 move and it's 2 mangonels. You have still in these few turns so much tempo on the board that you can just pass.
Yeah.
And even in round 2, when he tries to bleed you, you still have much more points. You can still go even in that bad situation, but it's very rare to have 3 mangonels, and I had most times the answers to at least 2 mangonels. Most of the times, and even 1 mangonel in the beginning doesn't hurt you that much because you have so much tempo to be in such a good state. And like I said, most of the times, what I experienced, maybe I'm just lucky, but I have 2 answers for the mangonels in my hand.
Usually in Scoia'tael too, especially with the decks we've talked about so far, you're going to have at least an answer to 1 for sure. And if you're playing, Ithne or even Shoop, you can just kill all his mangonels real easily. So
correctly.
Yeah.
And especially if you win the coin flip.
Even more so then. Yeah.
We're not. Don't make the Brewer combo first.
No.
Just to say that.
Yeah.
But I think that's covered in 2 sentences. That's matchup.
Yeah, that's pretty simple.
Mostly.
Yeah.
If we want to go a little bit deeper, we can also cover like the other matchups. If you want to have specific matchups, we can talk a little bit later about it, or you can also hire us mentors to coach you. And also, we have a few other mentors here in this Discord who are very, very appreciated if you give them a try. And all that I met so far are very nice people.
I like the word hire. It makes it feel more official.
Listening to this podcast later on YouTube, come on the Discord and write your what you want to get coached on, and we will find a mentor for you.
This message isn't sponsored by the Lodge.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
All right,
Let's continue.
monsters.
We're rambling too much.
Yeah.
That's it,
Let's wrap this up. So monsters. Um.
Monsters.
All right.
Monsters. We said it before.
Yeah.
Bad state.
Yeah.
Bad state.
It feels bad.
Feels bad, man.
Yeah. I wish monsters were better. They're not. You can beat monsters. Consume is the worst matchup against Brewer that you have, but if you win the coin flip, you can still beat Consume because you basically bleed them out of their win conditions, and then you win round 3. That's your game plan. Ithany is much more favored against Greedy Consume, obviously, but also we don't really worry about that a whole lot because Consume doesn't see as much play on the ladder. What was it? Was it like 6% or 5% or something like that?
6%.
5-6%. So it's not enough to not play. Something like Brewer of Consume is on the ladder, and even then, Brewer can still win games against Consume, dependent on the coin flip usually.
If Consume should be more popular, or you face much Consume, you can switch to Ithany deck, get in some tech, some juicy tech like Artifact Compression, Mandrake, and you're good to go.
Yeah,
it's just easy as that.
Be the solution to the problem. Deathwish, I guess Deathwish is the other. You have Arid and Frost, but Deathwish is the other big one that you'll probably see. Deathwish is pretty simple to play against as well. You basically just out-tempo them. It depends on the list, I guess. They do have finishers if they are running. Wow, I literally just blanked on the card name.
Well, don't know what do you mean. It's I mean it's depending on the. I think depending on the list.
Wow, yeah, depending on the list. All right, I literally just forgot what I was gonna say. Feels bad. Yeah, they have. Okay, against Deathwish, you just out-tempo Deathwish, and you usually are able to control the tempo of the round. Frost is very similar, and Moonlight as well.
Do you mean what? Wait, do you mean Nova?
Nova? Oh my gosh, that's what I was gonna say. Wow.
You mean Nova Deathwish list?
Yeah, I mean Nova Deathwish.
Do you mean normal Deathwish list, or do you mean Nova Deathwish list? It's a little bit.
So the Nova Deathwish list is slightly different. Thank you. That's what I was gonna say. But even then, with the Nova Deathwish list, the tempo that Brewer has is just better than the tempo that Deathwish has. And there's some. I think Deathwish is more a deck that has some cool combos, but in my opinion, it's not competitive enough.
It's important to also when you have much tempo, don't underestimate that he can also have some good point value plays to quickly get some tempo out. He doesn't have much. The Deathwish player doesn't have much. Maybe needs to invest a Nova to cut it.
Yeah.
But even then, he will do it because when he has a long round 3, he's in advantage.
Yeah.
And because he, like many monsters deck, when you have monsters, don't give monsters a long round where they can make use of their cards who could drives on long rounds. So even then, try to get a safe win in round 1, and you most likely win this game. Better go for a safe round and trying to get more cards out of him. I think that's safe to say because then you have the clear up advantage against Deathwish.
And usually it's correct to bleed rather than to try to get the one card advantage. Especially when you're against monsters, you don't want to try to just dry pass after you win round 1.
Don't underestimate how monsters can drive on long rounds.
Yeah.
If you want to see how monsters are correctly played or how to play against monsters, I would recommend watching Ocean Mud streams.
Yeah.
He's the god of monsters. He never played something else. He just plays monsters on 3 different accounts, and it's with every account under GM and under the top 1000. Sometimes with all accounts on the top 100. So when you want to learn how to face that matchup, learn that matchup by watching him, and you see how he plays against this matchup, and how he uh, will punish you for every mistake you make, and he knows exactly how to play monster, and
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah,
The only
that's what I'm
other,
saying.
yeah, the only other archetypes that I can think of that you might run into would be
Moonlight,
Moonlight, which
yeah,
is kind of similar in that you don't want to give them that long round.
yeah,
And it's actually easier to beat them because Moonlight has less tempo
it's very
than
slow.
Deathwish does. It's very, very slow. So Moonlight is not in a great place either right now. It's kind of a half-baked thing. So if you're playing Moonlight, you just force them to get out their Moonlights, right? And win the round. Or honestly, it's probably fine to even lose the round. If it's a long run one, you can just pass, right? Especially if you have War Dancer.
If Moonlight needs also to thin a little bit because it has very high chance to break.
To brick,
It
yeah, it does.
it can break pretty hard, and if it breaks, Moonlight needs every point it can get.
Yeah.
So if you see he bricks, use it. Use when you see his hand is bricked, just punish him for
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's really sad because Moonlight is an awesome archetype.
It is.
I want to see the play. It's just where the weakest point of this deck is it
Yeah.
can break very much with the foglets, the weather it needs to get out, and
The Sirens, yeah.
yeah. So that's also with all monsters deck have very high chance to break.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have very good thinning, so use that to your advantage. You have good thinning, you don't break that much. You use it against your enemy. That knowledge.
Yeah.
I think that covers monsters so far.
Yeah, I think that's good. And then Immorlith, that's just you kill him or you lose.
Yeah.
That's with any deck though. There's no specific matchup tips for that. Great.
Whether he doesn't see play right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
NR?
NR?
NR, I would say,
Yeah.
yeah. And we have a very legendary deck, the Hansel Machines. Do you want to say something about Hansel Machines?
Sure.
Also,
yeah, I can.
Also, when everyone gets his ass wrecked by this deck,
Yeah.
I think whoever played a few decks played runs of Gwent.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Hensel. Hensel is actually an interesting matchup to talk about here because some of the other matchups are a little bit more linear in terms of how you look at them across the faction, meaning the different decks that you can play across ST matchups similarly. When you play Hensel, it really depends, in my opinion, on what deck you're playing, which kind of changes up your strategy. Hensel is pretty favored against a swap, right? Nova swap, because the strat is to swarm the board, and Hensel just gets massive value. Like, if you want to learn to play Hensel, and I hate myself for saying this, but you can go watch Celebrate. But he does really well against Swarm Elves because he just has all the tools to kill the Swarm Elves, which means that the Vanguards are getting very little value, right? So, and he's getting a lot of tempo from that. So in my opinion, Hensel is probably favored against that. In comparison to that, actually, the Shoop lists and the hand buff lists are much stronger against Hensel because you have a lot of removal, right? Hensel doesn't have engines, so to speak, but they're trying to set up the Hensel combo, right? And so what you're looking at there is if they aren't able to pull off the Hensel or they pull off a suboptimal Hensel, all of a sudden you're in a really good position. Like we said earlier, obviously hand buff is all about control, all about removal. You've got plenty of tools, right? You can compression the Ronvid. You have plenty of ways to kill the machines before Hensel gets value off them. And then Shoop is actually really good too, because as we said, Shoop has, up to 5, 6, even 7 removal if you use Shoop, Shoop Hunter to replay removal or to just use it to kill his machines. So usually the traditional strategy with Hensel is to try to bleed out Hensel in round 2. So the general strategy playing against Hensel here is to keep track of what he's winching, right? And to try to predict what he's going to be pulling out with Hensel. However, so that being said, the general strategy with playing Hensel, or against Hensel rather, is to try and bleed him out to get that Hensel out right before round 3 so that he doesn't get a massive point swing. So honestly, the other decks do okay against this, because if you can somehow get into a round 3 that's short, or even a mid-range round 3, right, he probably has between 2 to 4 ways to pull out Hensel, right, depending on the luck of his hand. And based on that, you can just win those rounds. Like, the Hensel player is probably not expecting you to have all that removal in your hand, right? But if you have saved Ida, if you have the Panther still in your hand, if you have a buffed Swordmaster, which happens in both the Shoop and the hand buff lists, if you have things like that, you have just so many answers to his machines that he's going to try to play out in the round 3. You're actually, you can go into the round 3 feeling pretty confident that you have decent chances if you can remove his machines. The key here is paying attention to what he's played from hand and what he winches, right? So if he's winching something, that's more dangerous than something he played from hand, because he's probably not going to try to Hensel whatever he played from hand. As far as the Hensel matchup goes, other than that though, I don't there's not a whole lot more to talk about there. I think that would more go into just learning Hensel. Like, for a lot of these matchups, you want to learn the matchup, or learn the matchup by playing the deck some. So, but I think that is
understand it.
To fully understand it. Yeah, you want to be actually playing the deck. But a lot of people overestimate how good Hensel can be in that round 3. And if you have enough removal, Hensel just becomes bricked a lot of the time. Do you want to say anything about that?
Scorch and Villain Threatmat. Especially in a Shoop list, they will not find the targets they're seeking for.
Yeah.
So that's why Shoop is also a really good matchup. If you play Shoop and you have Hensel, don't be surprised if you win, because Hensel has its strategy, has its tactics. You have none. Or you have one, but you don't have a bronze core that relies on synergies that much. Yeah. So when you can trade, that's often the case. When you can trade cards that aren't that important to you, and get good cards out of him, use it. Use that knowledge for your advantage. It's all many times about knowing your deck, your strengths, your weaknesses, knowing the enemy's strengths and weaknesses, and especially Hensel. Machines has very good strength, but it has also weaknesses, and use that weaknesses. With this Scoia'tael list, I think it's you have good targets for him. You don't have that much removal. You're a good way to get Hensel machines in a position where you have the advantages getting Hensel out of him early, having so much tempo that you can get him.
Yeah, definitely.
Get him in round 1 to play Hensel. Also use the fact that when he Hensel doesn't when you win blue coin, you win the coin flip, and he doesn't have run with. That's good, very good position for you.
Yeah.
Not having run with, winning the coin flip, that's 2 indicators. You should definitely try to play tempo and get for that Hensel in round 1. that's a good way to indicate such a state, or a state where you can try to get the state that he plays round one cancelled.
Yeah.
And another thing is the use of the spire is very important against the Hansel player.
Yes.
And I think what we don't mention is I'm afraid to say it, but sir,
Oh my
the
gosh.
most favorite card of all Quint players,
Oh,
beside
man.
War Cancer.
Bananas.
Oh,
Yeah.
sirs.
Yeah.
Watch the points.
Yeah.
Really have an eye on the points against
I
the
even
Hansel
forget to
player.
pay attention to that. Even still now, when I'm playing against Henselt, there's times when I just forget. But yeah, that's
It can
key.
really make you hate yourself if you
Mm-hmm.
make that mistake and draw a game away you already won
Mm-hmm.
because of that.
Yeah.
Don't forget that, and don't forget he can brick on them, and it's
Yeah.
so satisfying if he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Melina is actually a low-key really good card here as well. If you can find her in that early round 1 and then have a way to ping his Ronvid down to 4 with the Panther or even with something else. With a 1-buff Swordmaster, right, to 5, that's a really strong play. Especially if you're on red coin. But stealing his Ronvid is really, really good. And another reason why Melina is a really solid card to play with a really high cap. But yeah, I feel like that covers the Henselt matchup. So yeah, you're right. For the Swarmless, you're definitely trying to bleed them out of their win conditions in round 2. Or even the Henselt in round 1.
Right.
And then I guess other archetypes, we don't really need to cover those as much. They're not really played that much, but you have Swarm, you have Redovid Armor. Against Swarm, I mean, I feel like some of these matchups, we're not going to need to talk about it as much because the matchups are more just general strategies that you would use when you play against them. Like, don't give Swarm the long round, right? Like,
yeah, just don't.
Just don't. Or you lose. It's pretty simple.
And they're all very slow in setup, and you have the tempo, so and you have the finisher, so just play like usual and then give them a long round.
Yeah.
Curse, Swarm, and Normal Swarm.
Yeah, all of them. And yeah, I mean, Nova Swap is just going to have more points than them every time as well. So initially when you're trying to tempo them out. So all right, Skellige, last one.
Last one, yeah.
Sweet.
A very nice matchup. We will likely to see Greatsword Longship and Longship Marauder.
Mm-hmm.
Both are very similar, I would say, but also have a difference. Yeah, both have longships. Yeah, one drive with the Greatsword mechanic, and the other one with the Marauder.
Mm-hmm.
You will more likely see the Greatsword Longship, I think. And isn't Longship Marauder is more like I would say, more like what I would say a more experienced player would play than a newcomer.
Oh,
I think.
I see. Yeah.
Because it has a little bit less points, overall point value. I think. It's on the other hand a little bit more flexible. How do you execute? Than Greatsword Longship deck.
Mm-hmm.
Greatsword Longship can have much more maximum point value it can have. Marauder has its gap for maximum points. Greatsword Longship can get much more value through Gators growing. Endlessly, unfortunately, not, because sometimes the round is ending, but it's, you know what I mean. You can get much more points out of it. It has no cap. So when you have a Longship Marauder setup, you know there is a cap, and but it's on the other hand more flexible. So be prepared that this player is a little bit more experienced, and uses the deck to react to your deck more. And Greatsword Longship has a very, I would say, strict tactic. There are not much. There is not much room for variations or different plays from the standard plays. So we will see in a Greatsword Longships matchup that the player will play the same openings over and over again. If you play against it very often, you will see the same moves. It's not it doesn't have overall much room for variation, and that's also a good thing when you know that. So you can uh, even predict what do will play the opponent player will play before he has played it, and so you can think how you can make best use out of your hand, and especially what is important against Skellige, how far you want to go in a round.
Mm-hmm.
Where is your best state to uh, get a good pass maybe when the round is long enough. Don't make the mistake to give him a short round a long round three, but it's also important to don't let the enemy player get cards out of you in round one. You don't want to waste because you still need to have good cards to in round three. So don't do, also when you see you have you lost the lead in round one, uh, play it, yeah. Especially when you have War Dancer, play
Yeah.
it. Depending on a coin flip, of course, because you can have in a situation don't go two cards down. That's never a thing you should do because then you're in a very bad spot. Uh, Most times you shouldn't do that with many decks,
Unless you're tailbunt,
unless yeah
and you can go as many cards down as you want and still win the
yeah,
game somehow.
and still you have the advantage.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things can happen during a
But
game,
yeah, no.
and even on the high, and that's why I think Grand is one of the interesting card games. When
Yeah.
you look at Challenger, you still have some very interesting plays and how things can turn out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, Overall, in this matchup, yeah, try to get his engines if you have removal. Scoia'tael has not that much removal. Other um, Scoia'tael decks have very excellent answers
Mm-hmm.
to denying the value of the engines. Have high removal. You have with Fnir decks you have the Mandrake. You have the Card of a Compression. You can play them one more time with Fnir.
Yeah.
You you have many decks run Shiro. Shiro is a high removal.
Mm-hmm.
When you play Shiro, don't make the mistake. I see that too often, playing Shiro too early when it's not necessarily because they get bigger, and you can maybe get more points out of it. But on the other hand, see if you, depending on what other cards you had and what the same is, it's also sometimes it doesn't make the sense. Sometimes it makes sense to wait with Shiro and get more points out of it, but sometimes it just doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
don't make the mistake to just play Shiro mindlessly. That's what I want to say. Think about it if it makes a difference to play, and it also counts for Scorch. I want to say if you play it right now or if you play it later, because if it makes a difference, you lose on points, or the game of the state of the game can change, and because of that can lose points. So and because of Scoia'tael is the faction with the most scorches available in the game.
Yep.
That's also a thing I missed before when we went through the cards.
Oh yeah.
It's very important to choose when you make that big removal, and
Yeah.
it can cost you sometimes points, especially in
Yeah.
that matchup. And it's also sometimes important when to remove some engine. Yeah. Depending on how he builds up his engine, sometimes it's sometimes it's good to let him build up a little bit. Yeah, his engine build, and then striking instantly.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you can let the other player think you don't have that removal,
Yeah.
and see what he plays and how he goes from that point.
Yeah, definitely.
But overall, what is removed and
Right.
can't be
It
and
always
can't
comes
be
back.
revived. I would
It
say,
always comes back.
but don't forget. That's the next point. Don't forget, Skellige is a nation who can revive and thrives on the revives. And so keep an eye on the graveyard against Skellige.
Yeah.
That's an important thing because what's removed with Artifact Combation, then it's out of the game. But
Mm-hmm.
or with the Mandrake when it's to 0 points, then it's also removed. But beside from that, when you have normal removal, don't forget graveyard. It's important to have an overall, I would say, all matchups to have an eye on the graveyard. Uh, and I think it's also in the Skellige matchup important to say that it's good to know how many revives are played, how many of the different cards are played. So it's really important to count.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes I see in against scaling matchups that they break. They can
Yeah, I mean, we
break.
saw that in Challenger,
I
right?
think we saw
Quite
it.
a few
Yeah, I
bricked
wasn't sure right
Challenger or
now. I thought
Squad
about it.
Skellige cards.
I think yeah, someone bricked on that. I think also in the past tournaments you see constantly Skellige someone is bricking on some card. The same when I think about it was with Hansel also in some tournaments that Hansel bricked.
Yeah.
They have a good chance.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why it's good to count.
Yeah. We didn't talk about Axeman. I don't think Axeman see as much play right now, though. Probably because of Alchemy, actually, right? But Axeman with the Scoia'tael matchup, the main things you're looking for in Axeman are if he doesn't stagger the Axeman, then your Shiru becomes your win condition. And you have plenty of other removal usually to deal with the other things he coughs out, right? So the Darren, if you're running the hand buff list, especially, you just have plenty of ways to kill everything on his board. So the Axeman matchup is pretty simple. You're just trying to use your removal well, trying to know when to kill which cards, or if he plays two Axemen on the same row with the same power, you just leave them alive to scorch them eventually. Things like that. So the Axeman matchup, pretty straightforward. But also, I don't think Axeman sees that much play right now anyways, so I don't think we need to worry about that too much.
Yeah, I would like to talk about Discord, but unfortunately, it's 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 nowhere near anywhere be found in a skeleton archetype.
Oh,
Uh,
discard, yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
makes me sad.
Unfortunately.
But just so I mentioned it, so we can hope it comes back.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah.
I know we were talking
Okay.
about this yesterday, but
Yeah.
Skellige is missing its faction identity, I think.
Yeah, it's missing the faction identity.
Yeah.
So
Great.
beside from that, that's what about Skellige getting missing. These both decks are, I think, the really viable decks right now because they bring so much points on the board, and everything else was kind of a little bit cut, so it came short. Definitely keeping an eye on Skellige when it comes to the future, uh, because it has in the past very strong decks, and it was every time a tough opponent for Scoia'tael, especially the reason that it doesn't have much spells. So Eglis was one of the, and it's still one of the solid gold cards, and since Squirtle doesn't have that many good gold cards,
Mm-hmm.
when the Eglis was in the meta decks and Skellige had a good deck, it's not that favorable because
Yeah.
then your Eglis is a brick. It's
Right.
just 8 point value card.
Right.
And I think that's also to mention because that was very important in the past. Right
That's
now
true.
it's not that important, but it's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
Do you maybe want to quickly go through veterans? Is that what
Veterans
you're
got no love from CDPR, so it doesn't get love from us too.
But
Just as easy as that. Yeah, we talked about if we should cover veterans.
yeah.
The thing is, veterans is it's there, but it doesn't bring any much near the points. Greatsword or Marauder. I think even X-Men. Okay, X-Men is also. I think X-Men can easily get countered today.
Yeah.
I think X-Men. We decided to mention X-Men and not veterans because X-Men can still find value against certain matchups and it still has interesting mechanics. Veterans is just like playing Marauder Bears, and also we didn't mention that because it's just point slamming without any special thing and doesn't bring that much points as Longships Marauder, for example, or Greatsword Longships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
We also
And-
didn't mention many other decks, possible deck combinations of who can appear. The thing is, we're still at pretty much at the end. The questions are up ahead, but we are already 2.5 hours in. So if we would like to cover more and go deeper, especially we would have liked to go deeper with the archetypes, even more the meta decks, and there's so many things you can talk about. It's just one workshop alone for that is the time. It gets pretty stacked. We are already 2.5 hours in, so
Yeah. The one thing about vets that we can say is
if
you
you
can
have
line.
really wait, let me talk to
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
if you really want to that we now talk a little bit about something you're really interested in, you have then now the chance at the question section um, uh, to ask us, and yeah, we can go a little bit deeper if you really want that.
Yeah, let's go to questions, I think. Yeah, I was only going to say with vets that with vets it's pretty easy to be able to line up your scorches there. Rip. Let's go to questions though. So if you guys have questions, feel free to answer.
Who was that gone now? Nordi?
It looks like Nordi
Nordi
is back.
Oh, he's back.
No, he's back. He's back. Yeah.
I just told them in the other channel that we are now at the
Yeah.
question
Thanks.
section. So if they have questions, they can come over.
Yeah. Let's go to questions. If anyone has questions, you can type it or ask in voice. And if not, we can just be done.
I think you guys were very comprehensive in your coverage.
I tend
Sweet.
to agree.
Try to go in certain aspects a little bit deeper in the details, and also give not only a general but a little bit a deeper grasp. Not all. It's a huge thing when you want to cover all, but at least what the meta deck and the current state is. So in that department that we cover as much as we can in that time, and so you out there, guys, can go out with the knowledge into ranked, and be prepared to face your opponents and have a good grasp of the current situation, and not only Scoia'tael in general, but also a little bit on the matchups you will face. And I hope we could make Scoia'tael for you interesting, and maybe you will learn to love Scoia'tael as we do, or not to.
Never.
Depends. I mean,
Oh,
sometimes Scoia'tael can be so good, and it was in the past so good that it can be literally cancer for many people because it is dominating that much in the player rates uh, and in the meta. Um, Nonetheless, I think Scoia'tael has a high variety of decks
yeah.
that, with different mechanics and fun builds, especially like Shoop. Many people, I think, didn't try it out till now, or stopped playing after a short while because it's
Hmm.
very different. But I think if you're one of them, try it out again. If you get a grasp of how to play Shoop and how awesome the Shoop deck can be and how much fun you can have with it, then you will have much satisfaction, many fun, awesome games, many moments where you will laugh out loud because it's such hilariously when some things work out in your favor, or your opponent just get memed down by the mighty glory of our Shoop.
Yeah. Just play Shoop.
It's
Just play Shoop.
I think especially now at the time where you have a really stable and some called stale meta,
Yeah.
is to try something different, and also a good time to try out different types of decks. We also mentioned a few decks who are not top tier. And I think it's a good time and it's worth the time to try out these decks. Maybe not in ranked. Maybe you have the chance to play it in pro ladder. There you will see a lot of crazy decks. Or
Yeah.
you go a little bit in casual. You can also, if you are low in the ranked ladder, don't hesitate to try out different decks in the lower ranks, in because there are also newer players who try out different decks, or don't not everyone is playing uh, the meta deck or has every card for meta deck or plays it as
Hmm.
efficiently like in on the higher ranks.
Yeah.
So don't hesitate to try that out. It will give you a better understanding of the game, of the faction,
Yeah.
and we will get better on it with every round you play. And play a
Hmm.
round of Gwent.
Play a round of Gwent.
That's
Great.
All right then.
Thank you
Thank you
guys
very
for
much.
joining in.
Thank you very much for all of
Yeah,
your
thank you very much.
wonderful, all of your knowledge that
Indeed.
you've shared with us.
Anytime. It was a lot of fun.
We'll call it a day there then.
Yeah.
Yeah, go play some
Every
Scoia'tael.
every 5 minutes more would cost you a lot. Yeah, I know.
100%
Yeah,
extra.
thank you guys very
And
much. Very willingly.
Oh man. Yeah, no problem.